hadn't seen. The reason I wanted a copy was because I hadn't seen it in like 10 years, and there's one place in Athens, a little independent movie rental place that has it, and it's like always gone because it's a historical artifact, so it's always checked out. And I haven't seen it probably since the late 80s. But just watch, I mean, I got plenty to say, so just watching it really took me back. I mean, that's the main thing. How do you want to,
well, I mean,
are you going to be on camera with the questions, or you want me to rephrase your question? And
ask the question. You know what the deal is? There's, the main thing is we're probably going to try to talk more about Athens and the scene than about Widespread Panic.
Good.
The band.
Because we weren't part of it.
That all the time, and we're just going to talk about sort of probably more like what was back then, like we saw the movie. It was just totally crazy.
Glad
and
to do so.
And then I don't know, we'll just say what was the last time you were probably back in Athens? Probably.
Oh, like a month ago.
Yeah. And we just talk about like what it's like now and what it doesn't have. Other than that, it's no big deal.
Sure.
And they're totally open-ended questions, so whatever you want to talk about. You say you got a lot to talk about. Feel free. I don't need to ask any questions at all. We're not professionals.
Well, neither am I. So
I'm here to see the show, man.
Right on.
My friend Bill is the guy who wrote the movie.
Right.
And he's he's my best friend. And so when you guys were passing through, they're trying to get it onto the DVD.
Sure.
And you guys, being that you were around back then and you're still around, he thought it would add some sort of coolness to it.
I think he's probably right.
So.
And I'm glad it's coming out on DVD because, just watching it, 15 years is a long time, really, relatively, especially with music and college towns, the things that college towns go through. So I kind of got misty, just watching it. Do you want me to look at the camera, or do you want me to look at him?
Go ahead.
No, just look at him. It looks better when you look at him.
All right.
And we're rolling.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, go ahead and ask me a question to get me started.
Well, I mean, you say you were misty when you watched the movie again after 15 years. I mean, why did it make you misty?
Well, I guess the main thing about seeing the movie, and it has been probably 15 years since it was shot, probably maybe 10 or 12 since I actually watched it. It reminded me of that time, 1986, that era. And there are interviews, people talking in bands about how they just did it because it's fun. I think Jim Herbert makes a comment about it was just fun. And it's an amazing juxtaposition because if you think about how those years were, Reagan was in power, he was about to play his trump card on the Cold War. It was kind of a crappy time to be an idealistic college person in a sort of bohemian southern town like Athens. And just the fact that everyone was making all this music and there was all this creative energy being put forth just because it was fun. And it took me back to those days. Here it is 2003, and there's another Bush in the White House, and I think maybe the time is right for people to do things because it's fun again. But just seeing those people, everybody looks so young. Everybody looks so young. I was young. Widespread Panic was just starting out. I remember, we were so young that we didn't even feel slighted because we weren't included in the movie. No one knew who we were, but it's amazing. It's made me think about the passage of time and what's become of a lot of those people, some of the great friends and Athens characters that have been lost. Laura Carter, John C. Wright, have passed away, and that made me sort of sad, especially with Laura, because when I first came to the University of Georgia in 1983, I was living in the dorm. I was living in Millage Hall, and she was living in Reed Hall, and one of my friends had gone to high school with her, and we'd get together, and I remember sitting around watching the Barbecue Killers learn to do what it is that they did so well. It's making me nostalgic.
How would you say right now, if you look at the creative scene right now in Athens, How would you characterize it now compared to what it was like when the movie was shot?
Well, I don't think that much has changed creatively about Athens since the movie was made. A lot of things have changed physically about Athens. There has been, in the last 10 years, sort of a tendency to tear down historic things and build homogenized things in their place. Like, I think probably the greatest example, because of its irony, was they tore down the church that REM used to practice in to build student condos, but they left the steeple by the entranceway to the condos, and they call it steeplechase or something. And I don't know, I guess that's just progress moving forward, but at the same time, it's a shame. Part of what made the Athens scene great back in those days was the fact that, being in the Bible Belt, bars shut down at midnight on Saturday, because after midnight it was Sunday, and that's the Lord's Day, and you can't sell alcohol on Sunday. So bars were never open on Sunday. They shut down early on Saturday. Therefore, what you had was a party scene. And the party scene in Athens during that time was notorious. House parties, parties in places like REM's church, old warehouses. There's an old textile warehouse called Stitchcraft, where you could guarantee a late night fun party. Those things have changed. But they changed the drinking hours, so we can stay out until 2 on Saturday night now, and you still can't really go see a band on Sunday. But there are definitely a lot more establishments for bands to play. The 40 Watt is still there. There's a place called the Caledonia Lounge. The Georgia Theater is still there. There are lots of smaller places that I don't really frequent, but they all have bands. So creatively, there's still a great atmosphere for it. And I think that the young bands that are trying to get started now, I think it probably feels the same for them. They are friends. There's a scene. It's not that cliquey. It's not cutthroat competitive. Bands aren't slashing the other band's tires so that they can show up at the gig while the other band's fixing their flat and go, those guys aren't here, but we are, so we'll play. They choose to play together. And I think that is a great thing. I remember when Widespread Panic started traveling, we'd go to a town like Boston and play, and I remember seeing in the dressing room of The Rat, the infamous Boston nightclub The Rat, tripping out on the graffiti in the dressing room because bands had it was like a contest to see who could put the biggest graffiti of their band name over someone else's. So you had these like wide swaths of paint, and it struck me how competitive it must be, and without the friendship and the interaction of all these different people and their creativity, you're not going to have any real evolution. I think Brian Cook makes a comment in the movie about being in 5 bands at once and finally having to decide just to be in one, so that he could write his songs just for that band. And, I think he's got a point. There's a ton of people in Athens that play in all kinds of different bands, and that's a beautiful thing.
Do you think after the movie there was a lot of talk about bands that came from Athens, and Widespread Panic came from Athens? Do you think the fact that you came from Athens was important for you versus coming from Cleveland, Ohio, or Chicago?
No, it's funny that you asked that question, because as an Athens band, we came from Athens all right, but we didn't really adhere to the general idea of what in most people's minds was the Athens sound at the time. Because once you got out of our little region into the nightclub circuit along, say, up and down the East Coast, the only band from Athens that was really well known was REM or the B-52s. They don't sound anything like each other. But somehow in the mind of the listener, the music consumer as it were, a sound of Athens was formulated. We didn't adhere to that sound. In fact, the reason I say it's kind of ironic is because we would show up at a club and it would say Athens, Georgia's Widespread Panic, and all these people in poofy-sleeved white linen shirts with black vests would show up, and we're out there playing these 20-minute jams, doing this thing. People are spinning like whirling dervishes on the dance floor. Those consumers didn't get what they thought they had paid for. But, I think that if you label something, you're limiting its ability to ever change and evolve. damn sure we were an Athens band just as much as REM or Love Tractor or the Kilkenny Cats or the Squalls. You know, we just we had a lot more rope. You know, we were maybe more desperate to get out there and starve and sleep on floors and you know, watch club owners take monies out of pool tables to give us enough gas to get to the next city.
Do you think right now that you talk about all the bands that came out of there and there's a creative scene, then do you think, and people, even you saw in the movie, people were open to watching bands that weren't maybe like them? You'd go see a band that wasn't like you, and people would give space to everybody. If you'd have a band that was one style, another band would be a punk band. Do you think that Athens is still as open and accommodating as it was now today as it was back then?
I think Athens is equally accommodating, and I think it's equally creative, but the one thing we have to remember that has changed a lot is simply the drinking age has changed. It was 19. When I came to Athens in 1983, the drinking age was 19, which meant that basically 3/4 of all the college students could go to any bar they wanted to and drink, which isn't a big part of enjoying music, but since music and bars are sort of indelibly linked together, you know, that worked. Now the drinking age is 21, and it effectively eliminates most of the college crowd. And I think that if there has been one thing that has sort of maybe stymied the growth and the continued regrowth of a local music scene, it's simply been that. But do not despair, because the parties are happening still, house parties. There's a place in Athens called Nucci Space, which is probably one of the greatest inventions I've ever seen. It was named after a musical person in Athens who sadly took his own life, had some problems with mental illness, and his parents and his friends got together and started Nucci Space as a place where bands can go practice. There's practice spaces with PAs. They stay open until like 4 in the morning, I believe, on weekends. So they can accommodate your band to rehearse. They have more of a performance space. And in addition, they have a coffee bar. They have free health care, mental health care. They have like a library and some internet access. And, you know, to me, that's a great thing. Any place where people can come together and be creative or seek some help or solace or empathy, it's great. And, you know, it seems natural to me that this would have happened in Athens. But things are pretty much the same. People still want to get together and make noise and have fun, you know. And something about Athens, the visual arts and the arts that you hear have always sort of held hands. And that continues to this day.
Dave, after the fall tour coming up, Widespread Panic's going to take off for a year or more. Are you going to be going to Athens? Are you going to be spending any time?
Well, I live in Athens, you know, and I really wouldn't imagine living anywhere else. And believe me, I've seen plenty of places that would be great to live. But Athens is special, and people are friendly. It gets a little hot in the summertime, but you don't get frozen in the wintertime, so there's that. And, you know, it's funny, a lot of the people in the movie are my friends, and they're still there, you know, and I'm in like 3 other bands. You know, everyone is. And I'm sure that I'll be hitting the nightclubs and I'll be enjoying being an Athens resident. You know, I really am looking forward to it. We've been on the road for 16 years as Widespread Panic, and it's just time for a little time off. It's time to enjoy the town in which I live, which is Athens, Georgia.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave.
Sure. Thank you.
See ya.
You know, that's, can I just make a little mention about your Flat Duo Jets
My
shirt?
favorite band.
Dexter he'd sit in with us sometimes, and we'd back him up. And the thing about Dexter is that he tunes his guitar to itself. And if you've watched him play, you notice he does a lot of bashing. So from song to song, his guitar would get more and more flat, out of tune. But he'd keep tuning it to itself. But generally, it would go from 440 to 3-something to, you know, it would just get lower and lower in pitch. So he's tuning to himself, no problem between songs. We're having to tune to him and tune flatten it down more and more as we go.
Well, normally it's a two-piece band, so it's
Exactly.
always in tune with the drums.
Him and Crow were in tune together, and I just think it's great because, you know, what is like the band right now that's getting more publicity than anyone? White Stripes. You know, and not that I dislike their music, I think they could use a bass player, being a bass player. But I have a lot of respect for Jack White simply because I've seen him do some VJing on some German sort of MTV where they can play. He got to play whatever he wanted, and it was everything from Bob Dylan doing Tangled Up in Blue to, you know, some crazy stuff you'd never get to see. And I know that he loves Dexter, and I know that they cite the Flat Duo Jets as a big influence, and how can you not? And to me, you know, I just think that that's great. And, you know, I knew you were the guy for this when I saw you with that T-shirt on. But, you know, it brings back so many memories. I was so young and stupid and still a teenager. And it's great to watch the movie. I'm really glad it's coming out on DVD. It really takes me back.
I guess you were a big hacky sack player back then.
Yeah, admittedly, it was fun. I was more of a Frisbee guy. It seemed more laid back, you know, to watch the disc spin through the air. I got it. Hacky sack's too much fancy footwork for me.
Yeah, that's pretty hard.
But, you know, in the dorms at those times, David Barbie from Sugar was around. Harry Joyner from Fashion Battery was around. Keith Landers from the Kilkenny Cats was around. Cliff from the Kilkenny Cats lived in the dorm or something. He was always there. I don't know why. It was a male dorm. You know, and there was always, it's just so hanging out on campus kind of thing. Hanging out downtown really made it special. And it is still that way. You know, I think Athens is an amazing town because you have an independent coffee shop, which happens to be where Ruthless Records was in the film, called Blue Sky, and a Starbucks right beside it, and they both coexist peacefully. To me, this sort of defines Athens, because in most towns, the corporate monster would drive out the independent. But Athens, we like our independent spirit.
Is it sort of related, would you think, to like Austin?
A lot of people make the Austin-Athens comparison.
I mean,
I don't see it. I see Austin as, it's more of a town where people go to create music on purpose because it's Austin. And every band that I've ever seen move to Athens because it's Athens has failed miserably. Athenians are fickle, they're opinionated, and they want their local talent homegrown. You know, no slander for Austin at all for me. I love Austin, but I just don't see the comparison. Athens is smaller. It's not a capital city. The thing that makes it bubble creatively is the fact that it's always new, that you could have a detuned guitar and live arc welding on stage and it's a band. You can't get away with that in Austin, maybe unless you're the Butthole Surfers, but they lived in Athens too, so.
Did they really?
All right.
Hey, thanks, man.
All right, thank you.
It's so awesome.
I appreciate it.
We appreciate